The two seed Michigan State Spartans take on the 15 seeded Bryant Bulldogs out of the American East. A matchup of two teams that obviously there's a talent discrepancy. There's just, the levels to these teams, but Bryant is a team that has been tested this year. They played a game earlier this year against St. John's that I actually remember watching because I was in the fade St. John's mood, and I kind of wanted to see if they were able to stick around. And Bryant was able to stick around in that game for a good part of it. They ended up losing by 22. Don't get me wrong, and they did not cover, by the way. But it did show that they were able to hang with better teams. That was one of the better teams they played throughout this season. They did not play any other. I'm sorry, they only played one other top 100 opponent. They played Grand Canyon, the number 93 team, a tournament team on KenPom, and lost 112 to 66 at Grand Canyon. So there's some small data points you can point to with the Bryant Bulldogs, coached by Phil Martelli Jr. For people that recognize that name, his father was an assistant coach on Michigan staff. But I'll throw it to you first, Dion. What are your initial thoughts on this draw for Michigan State? And kind of just yeah, your initial thoughts on it.
Dude, Bryant feels like a school that beat Calipari in the past. Am I wrong on that?
So they didn't beat Calipari in the past, but they had like either last year or 2 years ago, they had the leading scorer in the NCAA, Peter Kiss. He talked exuberant amounts of shit. They made the tournament, and a lot of people bet on Bryant to win, and they ended up losing. I think in either the first round or the first four game, I believe it was. But Peter Kiss was a menace in a bucket.
That feels like what I most likely remembers. I probably bet on Bryant in that game. But I mean, I love Michigan State's draw. By the way, like I love Michigan State's draw all the way to the Final Four, including Auburn. So I have Michigan State in the Final Four against Florida. That's where I ultimately think they lose, but I can convince myself they don't lose to Florida too. Going into Sunday, my thought process was if they avoid Florida, they're my national championship pick because I thought Auburn would have beat Florida in the Final Four, and I think Michigan State can beat anybody not named Florida. I love the idea of Trey Holloman versus Chad Baker Mazara. I think Trey wins that battle every single time. And I'm not talking about on the court, I'm talking about off the court. The mental battle. Like Chad Baker Mazara probably lasts anywhere from like 15 to 20 minutes in that game. I love the idea of Jace Richardson against anybody in the country. I've been saying it the last few weeks. Like, in my opinion, that's like he's a top 5 to 10 player in the country. He's not getting nearly enough credit for how well he plays. When he's like, this sounds dumb, but like when he's left open, there's zero doubt in my mind that the shot's going in. He makes all the right plays. When he gets to his left hand, he's pretty much impossible. So, I mean, I love their draw all the way to the Final Four. Obviously, I love it against Bryant. This should be a blowout. Subsequently, they're going to get a Marquette team that I think is playing some of its worst basketball of the season. And then they get the winner of Iowa State, Ole Miss. Iowa State's missing like half its roster. So I love Michigan State's draw here. I think that they're a really, really good team. I'm very curious. How does Matt Ishbia make sure that Jace Richardson plays for one of his teams next year? Whether that's the Suns or Michigan State. I have no idea which one it's going to be, but Matt Ishbia will be paying Jace Richardson next year.
Yeah, and look, obviously American East versus Big Ten, that's obvious thing we need to state as far as level of competition. I did mention some of the higher level opponents that Bryant played this year, but the one thing Bryant that impressed me in the little that I've watched of them is the length and the height of this team. They don't play anybody under 6'5". I'm sorry, Cam Ferris is 6'3", but outside of that, they are 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", 6'8", 6'8", 6'11". They're a very long and athletic team, which I think helps them in the American East because I don't think you see that type of length and athleticism in that conference. Now, if you had to point to one thing on Michigan State that they don't necessarily have, especially like the wing and guard positions, is the length, right? Like Jaden is 6'4", Trey is 6'2", Fears is 6'2", Jace is 6'3". Now all those guys are fierce defenders and competitors. I'm not saying they're going to get outmanned or out, worked by any means, but there it is a small data point that they are a team that maybe physically they don't have the size that Bryant has, or at least the length. I don't want to say size. I think I'm looking at KenPom right now, and the average height for Bryant is sixth in the country. So they are a very tall team, and they do have some really good players. The one that comes I think needs to be pointed out first is Rafael Pinzon. He's a guy who averages 19 points a game. He's a 6'6" wing. He's had some very high scoring games, averages 19 points a game. I do think it is going to be an interesting matchup for Michigan State. Maybe they throw a guy like Cohen Carr in him. Maybe Jay Nakins draws that assignment originally. But, coming off the Big Ten tournament, we just saw like a 6'5" ish wing in John Tanji be able to kind of have his way and shoot over Michigan State. Now, big difference between Pinzone and John Tanji, don't get me wrong. But do you think that Michigan State should be any somewhat concerned with the length and the height of the Bryant Bulldogs?
Nah, as no surprise to anybody, I'm not a hype guy.
Not
Not a hype guy. We all put we all put our pants on the same exact way. We all put our shirts on the same exact way. We all bleed. Not a hype guy. Michigan State will be fine.
Yeah, look, I think that obviously when you do look at some of the lower level schools like a Bryant, you don't expect to see guys like this size with this athleticism. That is something that I think is very much you should look at. But on that same token, these guys haven't seen well, they've seen something like Michigan State. That's St. John's, but we saw how that St. John's game ended. That was early in the year for St. John's as well. And also, as good as I said that Rafael Pinzon is against St. John's, which I would kind of constitute as the same level of defense as a Michigan State, even though St. John's has a little bit more length. He struggled in that basketball game. He only had 9 points. He had six turnovers in that game, only 4 of 10 from the field, 1 of 4 from three. I think that Michigan State's defense should be able to make things tough on Bryant. I don't necessarily see this as a game where they should struggle. I feel like they should handle business. They should be able to get what they want. Bryant, metrically doesn't grade out that great defensively. They're 148th in the country, so they're not awful, but they're not great. The thing I'm gonna struggle with is I don't know how Bryant's gonna score. I don't know how they're gonna score in this basketball game. They're not necessarily the best from three, not necessarily the best from two, but they're going up against a Michigan State defense that's top five metrically in the country, right? So I think that if Michigan State's able to score enough points, they should be fine in this one. Um, this is really a you show up and you handle business moment, and they should be able to, if anything, be able to just wear on the Bryant Bulldogs, even though they do have talent. I must throw this out there though, because I had no idea this guy was still playing college basketball. Shout out to DeMatha legend Earl Timberlake. He is still playing college basketball. It's had to be like his seventh year of college basketball, but he's a talented player. He's having a pretty good year for Bryant. So shout out to Earl Timberlake. I had no idea that he was still hooping. But we'll go ahead and get to the prediction portion of this preview. Um, but I do want to end it with this. I think that this is a game for Michigan State where I don't want to find myself worrying about them because I really don't think there's that much to worry about. Could Bryant maybe stick in it a little bit for in the game because of their athleticism and their length? Sure. But I think Michigan State will eventually do the Michigan State thing. They will wear them out. They're the better team. I find it very hard to see how Bryant's going to score. And I think this ends up being like a 20-point win when it's all said and done. But KenPom has this game as a 84-65 win, so a 19-point victory for Michigan State and Bryant. Where do you see this game going, Dion?
Business-like performance from Izzo and the boys. Very professional. I think they win 25-30. Bryant can't hang. I think you see Jace play sub 20 minutes because they're up by so much.
Yeah, I think it's a handle business moment, and I think that Michigan State this year has carried themselves with a very business-like approach, and they got a goal in mind. They know what they have to do. Coming off that loss too, that's what sucks for Bryant that we lost in the Big Ten tournament because that gives us something to go off of for the rest of this tournament. So that could not possibly go worse for them boys. But we will have the recap after that game over here on Sleepers Media YouTube channel. We got y'all covered for every NCAA tournament game previews and recap. Be sure to tap in.